Hey folks, so we're going to cover sections 5.2 and 5.4 of your textbook right now, talking about costs and other factors of supply. And so to begin with, costs have a few different components, and these are the costs of production, the costs that investments that businesses have to make when they're producing something. So one is fixed costs, which are things that businesses pay for no matter how much they produce, such as land, rent, electricity, equipment, etc. And then you also have your variable costs, which really depend on the level of production output, such as wages for your workers, depends on how many workers you have, supplies that you need. If you increase production, you need to pay for more supplies. And so to get to your total cost, you add together your fixed and your variable costs. And then connected to that, we have the marginal cost, which is the cost of producing one more unit of a good or service. And so for an example, well, actually, first off, we have a few terms that you need to be familiar with. So marginal product is the change in total output brought about by adding one more worker. And we're going to go through some examples of this in class, but just imagine you have a bunch of people doing a task, you add one more person to make it more efficient, and maybe adding one more person makes it even more efficient, but then if you add 3 more people, they start to get in each other's way, and it becomes less and less efficient. So we'll talk about that in class. And then we have specialization, which we've already talked about, which is having a worker focus on a particular aspect of production. And so an example of this is, imagine you have a factory that makes jeans. So the building and the equipment are your fixed costs, because no matter how many pairs of jeans you make, you still have to pay for these things. But then your variable costs are your workers' wages and the supplies, such as denim and thread, that go into making the jeans, as well as the extra cost of shipping more items. So if you want to increase the number of jeans you're making, you also have to hire more workers and purchase more supplies. So you need to make sure that your profit is greater than the added cost of increasing production. And then we're going to move on to section 4 of the chapter, to elasticity of supply. So again, this is really similar to elasticity of demand. Essentially, if a change in price leads to a relatively larger amount of quantity supplied, then the supply is elastic. And inelastic supply is when a change in price doesn't lead to a change in quantity supplied. So elastic supply happens when raw materials are easy to acquire and new technology doesn't need to be developed. So you can alter your production model fairly easily. But then supply is inelastic when there's a limited supply of the raw materials, when new technology can't be easily developed, or the item is complicated or expensive. An example of this might be cars. And another example might be, even though the price of oil has increased, the supply has not, because remember the law of supply, when the price of something increases, the supply tends to decrease, but the supply of oil hasn't increased because there are limitations in the technology and resources to extract and distribute it. So if we look at our supply curves, elastic supply is more horizontal because there's more of a change in quantity supplied when the price changes, and so there's a lot of change happening along that x-axis. Whereas inelastic supply, again, like demand, the curve is pretty steep because there's not much change happening between quantity and supply. There's not a whole lot of movement along that x-axis. So that is it for now. This is the last video. Don't forget to take the quiz at the end, and come to class prepared with any questions that you might have about this section.